Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here's your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Wilson, and I am the founder and host of the People in Fundraising Conversations series. It is late March 2023, and today I am really delighted to reconnect with John Beckvold, who I worked with at Harvard Business School a good number of years ago. And it's good to see you, John.
Good to see you too, Tim.
Thank you. John is currently the interim Vice President of Finance and Operations at Eastern Mennonite University in West Virginia. And when I worked for John and with John, I was a real junior prospect researcher, and our team reported to John when he was the head of finance and operations at Harvard Business School. And before we went live with the recording, I shared with John a piece of advice that he gave to me when I was, like 2 years into my career. Our team was hiring another prospect researcher, and John was helping to oversee that search. And at one point in the interview process with candidates, we were reviewing applications and discussing people that had come in already. And John said, "I like to see smiles on the faces of the candidates." And that has stuck with me for 20 years. And it's been such a helpful and profound, in a way, piece of advice that I've certainly remembered when I've been applying for jobs and when I've been on search committees all these 2 decades later. So, John, that is a blast from the past, but such a gem. So thank you.
My pleasure, and it still holds true. And it came from many years. I was a headhunter for 13 years before I went to Harvard Business School, and it was one of the qualities I look for in candidates, because how they present themselves to a prospective employer, the smile shows interest. And they, sometimes candidates can be very, very serious, and I'm the right candidate for this because, that isn't really what people are looking to hire. They're looking to hire people who want to work there and show that as a smile. So it's interesting that you've retained at least one thing that I said for 20 years ago.
Absolutely. It's been so helpful. So thank you.
Great.
Well, John, as I do with every guest, to start out our conversation, I would love for you to share a little bit about how you entered the nonprofit profession. And you've worked in various sectors throughout your career in different roles, certainly, and in different areas of the workforce. But if you want to zero in on the fundraising side of your career journey, I'd love to hear that.
Sure. My career started at Arthur Andersen as an accountant auditor. I moved into the operations side of Andersen and was really responsible for the Boston office for about 6 or 7 years. And then moved outside of Andersen into the world of finance. And once I was with a professional services firm, got laid off, and got into being a headhunter with actually three good friends. And we built a business from nothing to 13 years later. We're running at about $6.5–7 million a year, very successful. Then Y2K and 9/11 happened, and the internet became very prevalent, and the business really wasn't going anywhere. So after 13 years as a headhunter, I was left with the decision: what am I going to do with myself? And I really wasn't a great competitor for a finance job because I'd been away from finance for more or less the 13 years. This is bright, but I didn't have the credentials. So one of the thoughts I had was to move into the world of nonprofit, and I began to network with people I knew in the world of nonprofit. One of those was someone who I had a professional relationship with, Donella Rapier, who was the CFO and chief fundraising officer at Harvard Business School. I loved Donella, great person, still in great touch with her. So I networked with her just having lunch. It was Columbus Day of 2001. And
Oh,
she said, great, good idea. She gave me some great pointers. She actually hooked me up with a great interview to be the business manager for the Harvard University Athletics Department, which is a
wow.
big, it was a great job. Didn't get it,
Wow.
but that's okay. Um, I'm networking with something in Northeastern, and I got a connection at Brandeis, and I'm gung ho higher ed, thanks to Dell's operation. So it was about the third week in December, right before Thanksgiving. She gives me a call and said, "John, how's it going?" I said, "Great. Oh, I got all these good things going on." She said, "Well, would you ever consider working for me at Harvard Business School?" And
Wow.
not knowing the job or anything, I said, "Sure." For about 2 seconds, when do I start? And she said, "Well, calm down. We have a process." So, okay, good. So I came in and interviewed, I think it was early January of 2002. And the job was as the operations person for the machine that is Harvard Business School fundraising. So it's all of the back office stuff, including your research team and the gift processing group and the stewardship group and the backbones of that and managing the budget. And
Hmm.
the advancement operation, they called it external relations at Harvard Business School, is a big business.
Yeah.
Going back 20 years, that was a 13 to $14 million business. Donella was in charge of it, and she wanted me to be her finance operations person. So I came in. I'll digress from this just a minute. She told me the job. She gave me the job description, and I'm thinking, I'm not qualified for this. This is
Oh.
a disaster. I mean, I like Donella and I like the business school, but I'm not qualified. So I
Huh.
found I found a friend who was the head of advancement at Bentley College, and Bob Minetti, who's still a friend. And I called Bob and said, "Bob, I need an hour of your time tomorrow. I got an interview next week with the Harvard Business School about a job I don't understand. You need to give me fundraising 101." And he said, "John, no question." So we had an hour conversation. He get me the lingo of what a screening is, and I mean
Hmm.
all of the things that I just did no idea. So I managed to get through the interview at Harvard Business School with some very good people. Your boss, Valerie, was great, and met Christine Fairchild, head of the owner
Oh,
relations. So
yeah.
it was a very, very challenging interview because there's very good people there. And I met with Rick Melnick, who's now the CFO at Harvard Business School. At that time, he was the
Oh.
controller. Brilliant guy, way smarter than I was. And he asked me all kinds of questions about if I used a budgeting software. And I said, no, so I'm thinking, I'm out. I'm just done. So Danielle calls me at home that night. And I'm sitting around having a beer, watching probably a basketball game. And she says, "Well, the interview went well. We'd like to offer you the job." And I said, "You've got to be kidding me." But having no alternatives and liking Donella and liking the people I met, I said, "Okay, well, I'm in fundraising." And thank God for Bob Minetti, I was able to get enough lingo to get through the interview, and started about 2 weeks later. And that was the start of a fundraising career, which led to some great things. The team at Harvard Business School was very good. We were just in the early stages of a big campaign. First
Yeah.
one separately for business school, a $500 million campaign. I mean, numbers that just scare you. And and so I'm off and running and learning things, and I had no idea how the budgeting system worked, but after 3 weeks and a little tutelage by Rick, I managed to figure out the budgeting system and
Wow.
all the other things about it, and it ended up being a great experience. So I later found out what my key attribute was that Donella was looking for in filling this position, and it was my age and sex,
Oh.
because one of the departments that she'd had continuing problems with was the gift processing area, where there
Hmm.
were 10 or 11 women, all of whom had worked together way too long and didn't
Hmm.
get along. And it's a union environment, and there was a weekly visit
Oh.
to HR with a grievance.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was a royal pain. So Donella positioned my office on the far side of the gift processing area. So every time I went to lunch or the elevator or the restroom, I had to walk through gift processing.
Oh,
Or
wow.
basically didn't want to show bad behavior in front of an older male. So,
Interesting. Wow.
so while I was reasonably bright and had other qualities, my number one qualification in Della's eyes was a male over the age of 50 who would keep these women quiet. She wasn't about to tell me that at the time. She divulged that several months later after we'd sort of brought the gift processing group back as a team. And very capable, but they got on each other's nerves from too many hours of sitting around in the same office. So anyway.
I didn't know that story. And I didn't.
That's not what I published. I was going to say this podcast is going all over the world, so it may come back to me. But that was many years ago, and yes, that was a very interesting attribute that I didn't even think was a strength. So that led to a very successful relationship. I got on a couple of school-wide committees at HBS, and then was in the right position when Larry Summers took over the presidency of the entire university and issued the edict, we will all be on one fundraising system by next year.
Oh,
in very certain terms. And by that time, Donella had moved across the river to be the head of advancement and for all of Harvard University. And, Harvard Business School tried to lead the way. We were appointed or designated by Donella that Harvard Business School would be one of the leaders of this conversion from the old legacy systems to the new Illusion product that we went to. So, not knowing a great deal about systems, but understanding basic processes, I became part of a very small core team that met twice a week to develop the criteria for how the implementation would be handled. And it was a great experience, just a great experience. So got some great exposure there and learned a lot about how systems work. And again, talk about the inner workings of development. When you think of all of the fields and data that's compiles in an alumni and gift processing system, it's incredible. We must have spent 3 weeks on what is a gift.
Yeah, sure.
It just, of course, you know what a gift is. Well, who's to get credit to, and split gifts and split gifts between schools and spouses and different classes. And my God, it was just, endless, but a lot of fun, very interesting.
So cool. And how long was your entirety of your Harvard tenure, and where did you go from there, John?
I spent just about 4 years with the business school. When Donella moved across the river, Christine Fairchild took over. And it wasn't as much fun. I like Christine very much as a person, but it wasn't quite as much fun. And we were also sort of almost post-conversion, and the campaign was steaming along, and it wasn't quite as new and exciting every day. Still fun and still great people. And I got approached by a national search firm to interview for a position at Dartmouth College, for the university-wide position of finance operations supporting development. And university-wide, Dartmouth was even bigger than Harvard Business School. It was like an $18-19 million operation.
Oh, wow.
And again, multiple schools, and Dartmouth, again, a very, very successful fundraising operation. And so it was a longer interview process, but I spent the day in Hanover, 2 days in Hanover, actually, and extensive interviews and, all the higher ed process, and eventually got offered the job. And it was at substantially more money and did relocation, but it was worth it and a good opportunity. And as it turned out to be a very good experience. I liked Dartmouth very much. Personally, it was not a great experience because my wife didn't make the transition terribly well. And as a matter of fact, she moved up for about 3 months, and then she moved back to Boston. So I was commuting back every weekend, and personally, it was a very, very difficult. So that's why Dartmouth, I left Dartmouth after less than 2 years, not because of Dartmouth, but because of my personal situation.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And that leads me to a question, John. The second question, over your career, you've held roles at various institutions in a lot of different U.S. states, and now I'm surmising that living in the Boston area, then going to Hanover, New Hampshire, now West Virginia. You've done the rural, the small town, the big city, in addition to the diversity of the roles and universities you've worked at and other professional pursuits. And I've always been struck by people like you, and I've had a few other guests that have that rich geographic and institutional diversity. How do you feel that has assisted you as an applicant, as a candidate? How do you tell the story of, I've worked at these various places kind of across the country, in a way that, doesn't perhaps make the hiring committee see like, oh, Tim's worked in the Northeast and Florida and Midwest, and he's a flight risk. Yeah.
You hit a very good question squarely on the nose, Tim. That's a real challenge. And I think it's less so nowadays because I think more people are willing to accept candidates who might have made some rational changes.
Yeah.
My own case, I've had like 3 careers. There was the first accounting and finance career, then the 13 years as a headhunter, and now higher education, and now a higher education consultant. And so I can get into the explanations as I see fit, and there's really reasonably solid reasons for most of the changes I've made. But you're right, that's an issue. And what I encourage candidates applying for jobs is help a search committee bridge that issue before they actually have to ask the question. So in a cover letter, explain the shifts that you've made, or at least some recent changes, and then why your experience fits this particular job. Not always easy, and I guess I'm very fortunate. I've seen a number of different industries, from public accounting to the service industries. I ran a law firm for a while, and then all of the stuff in higher education. So I've had an advantage of but when I pull it together to respond to a particular situation, I need to make sure I'm pulling out the right pieces that fit the situation.
Oh, okay.
I'll relate a quick story. When I was a headhunter, we interviewed a lot of people right out of public accounting, and I had this one great candidate, a woman who had spent 6 years with one of the big firms in both audit and tax, and we talked about how to compile a resume, and she was great. And so I get a draft response about 3 days later. She sends me a draft of her resume, 14 pages.
Oh,
and I'm thinking, I was talking to the wall. She didn't get 2 pages is enough. She said, no. I wrote down all the pieces, and if I take items A, B, D, L, and P, I'm going to be a tax person. But then if I take items A, C, E, F, G, I can be an international person. And then if I take, she had basically done a file dump, and then she was going to recreate based on the job. Brilliant. Just
wow. Wow.
So, and as a matter of fact, she could be a great candidate for 4 or 5 different kinds of jobs.
Interesting.
I think I can do the same thing. Not that I'm a full-time candidate for anybody anymore, but I can still do the same thing. So it's important to just kind of extract the best things out of your resume and experience and package it.
I love that. That's a great answer. And I think, because for years, just kind of personally, my wife's family is all in Utah, and I'm from New England. And I thought, if I had to make an interim move somewhere out of the Northeast and ultimately get to Utah at some point, where there aren't a lot of universities compared to New England, and that's been my primary sector. I was just wondering, how would I spin that or tell the story as a candidate of like, oh, we moved, sequentially to get here. And so I appreciated your answer. Thank you.
Well, I'll digress to another topic quickly here, but my experience as a headhunter, particularly, and also as a hiring manager, is geography is always a more important factor than people give it credit for. Relocating yourself just for a job is usually not a great move. It's got to be a compelling job, or the rest of your life doesn't fit right. And so, in my case, moving to New Hampshire, it didn't really fit. In your case, in Utah, it did fit because you had relatives there. It was a logical next step for you. So the geography needs to really sort of make sense. And I saw enough transfers in Anderson where, a hotshot manager transfers to another office. And if the family's not happy, it's not a happy employee. So the rest of the reasons have to really sort of fit. It's sometimes difficult to determine in an interview, but I know more often than not, geography is not enough of a reason.
That's great. Thank you. I like that segue. John, you've mentioned a couple people by name that have been really instrumental in your career. So that was one of the questions. I wondered if, when I'm happy to give you more time to talk about Donella and Bob and others, or if you want to go on that mentoring question, but what have you tried to impart to people that you've been mentoring through your career? So
I left off the fundraiser, the smartest guy in the fundraising business I ever met, which was Dick Boardman. He ran the college fund, the annual fund at Harvard, the Harvard Fund, for over 20 years. He came over to business school to help get our campaign organized and with goals. And I mean, we started the campaign without a darn fundraising chart, a table. And which as soon as he got over, he said, if you don't have a gift table, you're not raising money. And so he put one together with you guys and research provide some of the data. But I mean, I just learned so much from Dick on a regular basis. I always said I never went to a meeting with him where I didn't walk away with some new knowledge, really knowledge. He just understood fundraising inside out, and had been a real student of the art and science, but more of the art of fundraising for many, many years. One of the
great.
Real pearls he laid on me was, why are Princeton and Dartmouth so strong in their alumni giving? And so he did some studying and got in behind the numbers a little bit. And he said, it starts with the application as freshmen. You're expected, it's not stated as such, but there's an ethos of you're part of the team and you're that way for life. And being an alum is just the next step of your Princeton life or your Dartmouth life. And that's why Princeton has almost a 60% alumni giving rate. Dartmouth, I think, is still over 50. It's because it starts so early in the process. It's just read in. They have, they're starting to have junior class gifts, and there's a senior class gift, and there's parents' funds, and it's just giving is part of the deal. So, I mean, Dick was just full of those little gems.
Oh, that's awesome.
There have been some folks along the way that I think I have mentored, not necessarily about fundraising, but just by being a boss who's willing to listen to an idea and let someone kind of run with it and make the case that it's a good idea. And, it's led to some very good decisions, not by me, but by the people who work for me.
Oh, awesome. That's great to hear. Thank you for sharing that. John, we have about 10 minutes left in this conversation. There's a few questions on the sheet that we can get to. And I would love to hear maybe first, how long have you been at Eastern Mennonite University?
Well, I'll give a little context to this.
Okay.
I left the law firm that I was executive director at, as they had a little tough patch in just before, I guess it was around 2010. The revenues are down a little bit, cash is down a little bit. I was an easy, high comped employee, and they decided to cut back the executive director. Didn't replace the job for like 3 years.
Okay.
And so I was out of work, and so I said, well, hey, I did a little consulting, a couple of friends things, but I basically retired.
Wow.
It was terrible. I was not for retirement, way too high energy. My wife at the time had a very, very responsible job. She'd come home at the end of the day with all kinds of stories about, I handled this problem, we got this opportunity, this merger, and I'm, what'd you do? Well, I got dinner ready and I walked the dog twice. And it was awful. So very fortunately, through another nice networking connection, I got hooked up with there's an organization called the Registry, which is a group of senior higher ed people who are available for interim assignments. And the higher ed loves process of hiring. that process can take months and months and months. In a
Yes.
small school, you can't afford to be without an executive for months and months and months. So it started 31 years ago with two former college presidents bridging some interim president roles. We now have close to 2,000 people in the registry.
Wow.
At any one point in time, there's a little over 300 who are out on assignment. And so I took an assignment with them as it was offered and vetted by the process. And it was a small commuter college in upstate New York, Maria College, and it worked out great. And when you're an interim, your key assignment is find a permanent successor. And
Sure.
I did. And the hiring process went great. And Joel took over from me after about 19 months. He's still there. Maria's doing great. It was a very successful assignment all around. So I came back home, and the next assignment that sort of popped up was Glenville State College in West Virginia. And I said, no way, this place looks like a disaster. I've never been to West Virginia. I don't want any part of this. And they finally said, well, you're not doing anything else. Why don't you take a fly down and go in the interview? And I said, well, yeah, I guess I had nothing else to do that week. So sure. So it was literally, I was coerced into taking the interview. Went down and fell in love with the campus, the people, and I did like the president. He eventually turned out to be not a terrific president, but a good guy. And one of the disasters was a potentially devastating debt situation. They were in the process of refinancing, and we completed the refinancing about 6 weeks
wow.
out there. So there were some very bright lights, and so I took the job. It was going to be a 1-year assignment. It ended up being 3 years and 2 months, extended 3 times. Went through the first president. I was the interim president for 3 months, and then 2 more presidents before the next president decided no more interims. He wanted a permanent VP. But it was a great assignment, great people, and I decided to make that home. So I
wow.
and I bought a house, and I'm out in rural West Virginia. Stop by anytime. If you're on your way to nowhere, stop by because I'm on the way. I've had other assignments at larger universities at Delphi for 6 months. Just finished recently St. Elizabeth's University in Morristown, New Jersey as the CFO.
Oh, okay.
Again, bridging between a guy who retired and the new hire that came in last January. And I've been Eastern Mennonite now for about 3 months. And their fellow left in mid-November. I came in mid-December, and we're in the process of conducting a search for a chief operating officer, actually, here at Eastern Mennonite, which would be a great situation. If I can plug that a little bit, Tim, candidates more than welcome. Eastern Mennonite University, emu.edu.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And John, I have a couple of follow-up questions, and just, again, keeping track of time, but I'd like to dive in a little bit more about these interim assignments. I imagine as you've gone from Maria and to other universities over time in these interim capacities, you are taking with you the past experience of how senior level positions, the searches for presidents and VPs and such go. So I would imagine, this maybe isn't so much a question as an observation, but I would imagine that experience makes you a richer, more sought after candidate for successive interim roles when they come up. Is that accurate?
I think that's spot on. And at St. Elizabeth's, the president actually asked me to head up the search committee. I thought that looked like a conflict of interest, but I was an active member of the search committee. Here at EMU, the president also asked me to be a key member of the search committee. And right in our profile on the website is, if you have questions about this situation, please call John Beckvold, our interim vice president. So yes, I think it does help having the headhunter experience and being able to assist my customer, my university with that hiring process. And I have taken little kernels out of every experience has its own good points. There's some things I would never repeat, and I have a list of those too. But there's good things to be taken out of almost every experience, and I'm hopefully collecting them and applying them to the next one. And I have no idea what my next assignment is going to be, but I'm going to take some good things out of Eastern Mennonite and their the philosophy of the Mennonites and all of that is core to this place. Very interesting. So yeah, it all builds. And I guess the day I stopped learning, the day I retired was when I stopped learning. That's why I got back in business, and I enjoy the learning and contributing. It's very, very rewarding.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I really love the pursuit of continual learning as well, whether it's professionally or personally. And my last question on that thread is, what have you learned maybe about yourself as you face the conclusion of one interim role and you're waiting for the next one to arrive? How do you sort of psychologically, emotionally, work through that interim of the interim assignments?
Well, I take the time to do a little relaxation. I took between one of my assignments, I took the months of March, April, and May off last year and pursued some personal hobbies around West Virginia and enjoyed that time very much. And then I got back in the swing of things at St. Elizabeth. So it's good to just sort of decompress a little bit. As a consultant, you don't earn vacation, you don't get PTO. So you're basically here full time, and it's reasonably intense. But for 6 months or a year, it's anybody can do anything. So, but it's good to take a little time off in between assignments. And the way the registry works is they're very appreciative of any time that you want to take, and they don't pester you, and you'll still be aware of opportunities, but don't feel you have to take them. So I think being a consultant, at least for me, and being willing to do some relocation, it works very well for me. And I like the time in between assignments for exactly the relaxation time that some people get by taking lots of Fridays off and long weekends. I do it by taking 2, 3, 4 weeks of doing nothing.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't considered that. Yeah, and it definitely having that block of downtime after these, high pressure assignments, and you're helping universities bring on the next president and such.
And the registry does the marketing of the opportunities on my behalf. So I don't have to worry about where my next assignment is going to come from. The registry is full of opportunities. And so it's, as soon as I want to kind of get back in the game, I'm going to have plenty of opportunities, and I'm going to keep doing this because I enjoy it. People ask me, when are you going to retire? I said, I tried that, didn't work. Might work a little less frequently or a little less intensely, but I'm going to keep at it.
That's wonderful. I wish you the best, John. And just one last question.
Certainly.
You're based in West Virginia. One of my favorite songs is the John Denver Country Roads, Take Me Home.
Played after every winning basketball game at Glenville State University.
Oh, that's awesome.
We finished fourth in the nation. Women's basketball finished fourth in the nation this year. Last year won the NCAA Division II tournament. Women's basketball, little 800 student Glenville State playing Eastern Washington with 14,000, and one of the Texas Division teams with 16,000 students, and we played, and it's been great. So yes, I love and Country Roads gets played after every winning event at Glenville. It's great.
Oh, that's so cool.
Like the national anthem.
So my last question related, is there a favorite spot that you have found in West Virginia, or is there a spot you haven't yet gotten to in your new home state?
Well, if I was a little more adventurous, I would go kayaking through the gorgeous new state national park of New River Gorge, which is fabulous. I just haven't taken the time to get a kayak and a couple of people and make the trip. But there's some beautiful, beautiful country. It really is very interesting topography, great place. I'm a huge fan of West Virginia with low taxes and plenty of room to spread out. I got an 8-acre farm with outbuildings and a rental unit, and next to zero taxes, my own gas well. I have free gas. So I mean, it's
my goodness.
When Denver says it's almost heaven, it's almost heaven.
That's marvelous. I have a cousin who is a firefighter in DC, but he lives in West Virginia.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And he's been there for years. He's a retired Air Force firefighter, and pilot and such, and then went into firefighting in the DC FD. But yeah, he and his wife have this beautiful acreage and massive, in-ground swimming pool. And he's like, yeah, come out here whenever you can. So I may be in your neck of the woods at some point in the future.
Well, if you don't look me up, Tim, I'm going to be very disappointed.
All right. We'll bet on that.
Good deal.
Well, John, this has been really enjoyable. So just pleasurable, fun to reconnect with you after so many years. Thank you for the generosity of your time and sharing your career experience.
My pleasure, Tim. Enjoyed the conversation very much. Great to still stay connected with you and some of the other HBS folks. Been great.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a fun network. I've had a few other people on the program, and John, you were one I wanted to have on because of the diversity of your finance and operations experience. So thank you very much. And I'll be posting your interview sometime this spring. I'm taking a little interim pause myself with the posting of interviews, but I've got a spring lineup coming up, and I'll be honored to feature you in that.
Good. Well, make sure you tell me when it gets live, because I want to make sure I share this with my friends.
Will do. Absolutely,
Great,
John. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.